special guests, Derek Drulard, Executive Director of the Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Society, and Cheryl Sprague, President of the Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Foundation Board of Directors. We're going to start today with Derek. You've been at the helm of the Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Society for about 3 years now, a little over 3 years. Can you share with us some of the highlights of your career and what brought you back to Windsor? And I say back to Windsor because you are a Windsorite.
I am, yes. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, this past August, I celebrated 30 years in child welfare. So I've been in the sector for 30 years, and I've worked for, this is now my 4th Children's Aid Society. And so, as you mentioned, it was a homecoming. So the opportunity to come back to Windsor-Essex, to be around family and friends, to have the challenge of this this position was exciting to me. So really, I said to my father years ago when I moved away, I'll never come back, and here I am. So I'm so happy to be back in the Windsor-Essex area and to be back home.
Great, and we're happy to have you here.
Oh, thanks.
Now, can you just tell our viewers, perhaps, what is the primary role of a Children's Aid Society?
Yeah, the primary role is safety and well-being of children in the community, and we have a legislative responsibility to follow our directive and our mandate, and we believe the best way to do that is through working with families in the community through strengthening families. So while it's about child protection, child welfare, we really like to practice from the lens of welfare of children in the community with their families.
Mm-hmm.
So jumping into a big question, Derek, how does the Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Society work with community partners to help us deliver the services that we have?
Great question, and certainly a key component of strengthening families and working with children and youth is the partnership we have with our community partners, community members. And that is done through a number of ways. We have memorandums of agreement, we have protocols, and we have procedures, but really when we boil it down, it's about relationships. So we develop relationships with the community partners to best serve families. And what we know, our families are the best architects of their own intervention. And if we could provide that support, facilitate that change, facilitate services and resources, working with community partners, then that's the best way that we know how to make a difference for the families that we service.
Right, and more than ever, we really rely on our community partners to really help wrap around our families. We can't do this work alone.
We cannot, and the old adage of it takes a village to raise a child is certainly true, and certainly true of our organization as we continue to reinvent, reimagine, and rebrand our own way of working with families from the Children's Aid Society lens.
Right,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, speaking about our families and the children that we serve, how many families do we work with and in what capacity? So what does it look like? The number of families and how we come to work with them.
Sure. So I'll take a bit of a snapshot from last year. So we had about 3,500 referrals come into the organization last year with various referral sources, this thing, I've got a worry, a concern for a child. And of those cases, then we look at how many of those are we going to open in our organization and see if there's a way to support to help families. And then of those, we might need some more services, some longer term work with the families. So right now we have about 830 open family service files, which is the bulk of the work that we do at the organization, where we have open files, workers are attached to families, a number of our services, resources, programs in order to assist families in the best way. So we have some cases that come in and we might just have an opportunity to connect families to the community and not open it to our services, but we act as a community connector to make sure families get what they need in the community.
Right. Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Now, we all know these are very challenging times, and there's all of us are finding it difficult in many ways dealing with the circumstances that are surrounding us, particularly since the pandemic hit. But there are so many challenges out there. So how is the Children's Aid Society, I guess, reacting to that, addressing that, and coping with that, particularly in the way they serve families in the community?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've certainly not been immune to the pandemic and how we've had to shift our services and quickly pivot towards how to help families in a different way. At the peak of the pandemic in terms of lockdowns, where our staff were doing things a lot from a remote perspective and connecting with families through remote platforms and those kinds of opportunities. And so what we know is that the families that we serve in the community are amongst the most marginalized, vulnerable families in our community. So the pandemic they would experience the impact of the pandemic disproportionately to the rest of the community. And so we really need to rally our services and resources and those of the community members to support families in the best way possible. And that comes in many different forms, up into including understanding things like equity and how to approach families and work with them with cultural humility to understand that families in their communities and their culture are best situated to know what their own needs are and how to meet them. And then we, instead of being agents of authority, we want to be facilitators of change. And so from our staff's perspective, also, they've been impacted by the pandemic. We all have. And so the mental health and the stress of all of us has been challenged during this time. So the rally of our staff and our community to support these families has been amazing. The pandemic has been brutal. But outside of that, what we see, the other coexisting truth of the pandemic, we've seen such compassion. We've seen such rallying calls from our staff, from our community, from our foundation about supporting the families in the best way possible. So there is components of the pandemic that have taught us about the way that we could shift and move. And we're all yearning for to go back to the status quo, or not the status quo, to go back to how things were, the quote unquote normal life that we had before the pandemic. But I think there are things that have been positive for us that are here to stay.
Mm-hmm. So saying that, and this is kind of related question, what are the key issues that the Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Society, the resources, I guess, that the society relies on in terms of supporting families and particularly youth too, that live independently, that might feel isolated during these times? So what are the resources that perhaps you call upon with your staff?
Yeah, and when we look at the main reasons why families come to an attention of a Children's Aid Society, it's usually about big social problems that families are facing in the community. Poverty being the number one driver of referrals to the organization, up into including things like mental health issues, addictions, intimate partner violence, and marginalization. And so what are the resources available that we have to support families who are facing those big social challenges? We know that there's some significant homelessness and poverty within our community, and we know that has great impact on families. And so the resources that we use not only are human resources, which is our staff that support families, develop plans with the families to assist them with some of these issues, and then also leveraging our resources from a financial and other resources that we could use to support the families. And where the government provides the funding, that we could use our funding in the best way possible, we of course need the support of the community, and that's where the foundation comes in. The foundation does, and Cheryl will explain this better than I can, a great job at providing some of those additional funds for gaps where the funding that we have doesn't cover off for the things that we want to do to support families. So when we see, it's like you see a need, you fill a need. We go to the foundation and they're able to rally the community to support for education purposes, for the programmings that we have. And so it really is a joint effort between the use of the best resources that we have available and relying on the community to fill those gaps where they exist.
Great. And that's a great segue to Cheryl. Welcome, Cheryl. You've been involved with Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Foundation for a number of years and currently are our president. Yes. What is it about the foundation that inspires you to be involved and the many opportunities that we have available to us through the foundation?
I have to say that it's the children. My background is in early childhood education, and I have several child care centers in our community that I operate, and unfortunately through my work I have seen firsthand families and children that are in crisis and require the services and support of the Children's Aid Society. I felt that I could contribute to help improve the lives of these children and their youth in even a small way. I find it incredibly rewarding to be helpful in this regard. And I continue to stay on the board for those reasons, of course, but I also have to say that my fellow board members are all, we are all of like-minded and all have the same passion for what we are doing. We all feel an incredible need to help the youth and children and families that are in the care of the society. So it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to work with the board that we have. We have wonderful people on our board and very kind, giving people on our board. And also when we occasionally hear stories from the youth or families that are in the care of the society, it's very moving and very touching, and it makes you just want to do more and help more wherever we can.
It's wonderful, and it is important to share those success stories with not only the board and our society board, but within the community. And so it's really wonderful to be able to celebrate the successes that we have. But it's a lot of work that the foundation has ahead of them to be able to support the programs that we have.
Yeah, and I guess just adding to that, Tina, I guess the question, Cheryl, is what is the specific role of the Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Foundation? And I guess, you know, sometimes people get the entities confused, the society and the foundation. So what makes the foundation so unique?
Well, we are a separate board. We are our own board, our own foundation. And the role of the foundation is to raise funds for programs that nurture children, empower the youth, and strengthen families that are served by the Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Society. Now, most of these programs have very little to no funding available to them through the society. And we rely very heavily on our incredibly generous community to provide us with these funds to enable us to support these very special programs for the children that are in the care of the society. And we do this through, we have individuals, groups, businesses, we have grants, we have special events that we do, all help contribute. And but as I said, through the generosity of our community, that's how we raise our funds.
Right. And I think, as both you and Derek said, the impact of the foundation is essentially what really motivates change and positive change with those people that we serve and support.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about those programs that are offered through the foundation. Can you give us some highlights?
Yes, I certainly can. I'd be happy to. Some of our programs, first we have our very successful holiday program. We serve over 900 families during the holiday season. Then we have our summer camp program, where we send over 300 children every summer to a camp experience. We also have our back to school program, where we have about 900 backpacks, new backpacks filled with all new supplies for the children so that they may start school on a more level playing field with other children in the community. We have bursaries, approximately 45 bursaries, where they are there to assist the youth who need financial assistance for post-secondary education. So that's just to name a few of our programs.
Yes, very fantastic. And I know myself, I'm involved with a lot of those programs, and just hear the incredible testimonials, not just from children and youth and the families that we serve that benefit from these foundation programs, but also from staff and how much it supports the work that they do. It's not always easy going into families. There's some real serious issues that they're faced with. And so to be able to bring that joy to them through these programs is so not only a great opportunity, it's really vital.
Yes, it is.
And Cheryl, you indicated too that, I mean, there's very little government funding for most of these programs, either little or none.
Yes.
So that's where the foundation comes in. And you touched on the generosity of the community and where the funds come from. Maybe you could just elaborate on that a little bit, and perhaps a good news story about a recent campaign.
Yeah. We, as I mentioned, yes, we raise most of our funds through our very generous community. We just completed a 5-year campaign. It was called You Can Write a Child's Story.
Right.
And we had a goal of raising $2 million. We raised $4.2 million.
Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. Our community is so incredibly generous. Those funds stay local. Those funds stay here in our community, serving and assisting with the children and youth and families that are served by the Windsor-Essex Children's Aid Society. So all that money stays right here within our own local community. So that is how we do raise funds through major campaigns.
Right. That campaign was a huge success. And
Yes.
again, when we talk about Windsor-Essex, everybody always says we're number one across the country, across North America in caring, and what a great example of that.
Yes.
So the foundation's moving on. The success of that campaign, of course, very evident. But I understand that the board has worked over the last couple years on a new strategic plan. And some of the priorities of that strategic plan are strengthening families, working with youth, particularly to live independently, to provide them with the resources to overcome obstacles, looking at new virtual platforms. I think, as Derek mentioned, one positive thing coming out of COVID is we've discovered how we can virtually communicate with each other. And there's ways after the pandemic that I think that's going to continue, and the foundation has recognized that. So I'm moving forward, and I understand those are the priorities of the campaign. How do you see the new strategic plan as a roadmap in terms of the foundation's future direction?
This is something that the board has taken very seriously. And we have, as you mentioned, Michael, over close to 2 years, year and a half, close to 2 years, we have been much deliberations, consultations, much discussions, and have come up with a really wonderful plan. The plan gives us a strong focus, and it has also strengthened our relationship with the society board. And it's also aligned us with many goals with the society that are similar to our own board. So we're really pleased about the plan that we've put in place and the campaign that we are planning to kick off in the very near future.
Cheryl, finally, what is a legacy gift?
Oh, a legacy gift is a gift that will live on in the lives of others. It's a way to support the future dreams of a child or a youth, so that they can have hope in the future. I would particularly ask anyone who would be interested in providing a legacy gift to please contact Michael about that. He can offer you a package and more information about what a legacy gift is all about.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, we've had some wonderful success with that. And I think it's like, I guess it's looking at the future. Legacy gifts aren't immediate, but I mean, it's looking at, you know, how do you want to be remembered and how do you want to make a mark? And, you know, we have an example, as Cheryl knows, of a recent gift of $300,000 from Virginia Revest and her husband Sid, who left that for bursaries for our youth. Those bursaries were able to award 10 at $1,500 each per year. So this is going to go on for, of course, a number of years. And you think of the impact that's going to have on those youth over time. And the lives that can be changed and the knowledge that can be gained and all the experiences that will come out of that in the end. So as Cheryl said, a legacy gift is lasting. I mean, we used to call them wills and plan gifts, but now it's just something really special that really moves who you are into the future, into another life.
For sure. So Derek, let's come back to you.
Sure.
You talked earlier about this redesign of child welfare in a new direction. Where do you see our Children's Aid Society in the next 5 years in terms of enriching communities and supporting children, youth, and families?
That's great. I'll piggyback on the You Can Write a Child story and say that it's our collective opportunity to write a Children's Aid Society story. And our story, I hope in the next 5 years, what we'll see is a redesign of our service so it's delivered from a more equitable lens, that we're focusing on the strength of families, the things that they, with their formal and informal support systems, can achieve, and that in fact the health of a community would be such that a child welfare service would shrink, that we would have support services in the community with grassroots organizations, mental health supports, poverty supports for families, so that further movement into the child welfare system isn't necessary. And so for me, in the next 5 years, as we grow and become a more equitable and family engaged service and not agents of authority, I see that those are the things that will rebrand us so that families say, you know what, this is a place where I can go to get help. This is an organization that in fact don't take children into care. You know, the biggest myth out there is that all of our work is with children in care. 90% of the children we serve are with their families in the community. And so I would like to see the opportunity for us to become that sort of really strong equity champions for families in the community, and that families are better off for having had contact with our organization, and that we've truly been able to demonstrate we've made a difference.
Right, and certainly with this podcast series, we want to really shine a light on those organizations that we work with, because we don't do this work alone. And it's as important for community services to understand that we're here to help families so that they feel comfortable reaching out to us, to wanting to collaborate, and really ultimately for the goal of really building capacity in families so that they really don't need child welfare intervention.
Yeah, to be about prevention, early intervention, and support versus investigation and protection.
Right.
And that's where we are positioning ourselves as a sector with redesign and our own organization with the community. And those are the strengths that will make the biggest difference for families, for sure.
And that's where our new campaign is going to focus on, is providing resources for the children and their families with the hopes of eliminating these challenges by providing tools for them to help create a better future for them. So that is, you know, the exciting new campaign that we are about to reach out to our community very shortly about. But it ties in with what you are absolutely saying.
Great
Derek,
alignment between the foundation and the organization. Like, we have our own strategic plan for the organization that we'll be rolling out shortly, and very much so those things are in sync with one another. So you know, that should strengthen the services and resources for families tenfold between the efforts of ourselves and our community partners.
Yeah, I think moving forward, there's so many ways to support the foundation, which in turn is a huge resource to our families, to the children and the youth that the Children's Aid Society supports. So I think, you know, it's very unique because, as Cheryl said, those dollars stay in our community and they impact those people that are our neighbors, that are the people down the street, people we interact with every day. And it's trying to really make a family stronger so they can really contribute as they would like to our community.
Exactly.
Great. Well, before we close, do you have anything else that you would like to add, or a call to action to our community?
Just that our, you know, our campaign is going to be kicking off in the very near future, and once again, we will be reaching out to our tremendously generous Windsor-Essex County to help us support our new campaign. So we're hoping to have another successful campaign. And thank you so much for all your contributions thus far.
Derek, final words?
Yeah, I would say that certainly along the same lines of what you're all saying is thanks to our staff and our volunteers and our board and our community for making a difference for children, youth, and families in our community. There isn't a better calling, and so I think collectively we'll be able to make that difference in a big way. So my special thanks to all of our community staff and volunteers.